Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Øystein and I'm trying to become a bookworm. In this video we're going to talk about 10 modern classics I'd like to read. I get that the term modern classic is a bit contradictory, but I like it and that's why I've chosen it for this video. The books we're talking about today are published between 1945 and 2002. 1945 because I made a video about classics I want to read that were published before 1945, and then 2002 is suddenly 20 years ago. So I thought 20 years ago, that should be sufficient to call something a modern classic at least. I've tried making this list kinda diversified so I will find new authors and new types of books so I don't get stuck in one track. There are probably thousands of books from this era I want to be reading, but for now I've stuck with these 10. I'll start off with a book that I'm soon going to read, I think, and that's Agarland by Albertine Sarrazin. Patti Smith's favorite book, and I have to say I'm surely butchering both the title of the book and the name of the author, but I hope that's okay. It was first published in 1965 and it's a French cult classic, and the scary thing about this book is that it's supposed to be based on the author's real life. And I say scary because in the book we meet a woman that escapes prison and breaks her ankle while doing it, and then she is picked up by a biker who is also on the run. And I haven't read more about the book, just seems to be exciting enough. And the author herself quit school and started prostituting herself and then was put into jail. So I will be very interested to see where this book takes me. It's supposed to be a French road movie novel and also a timeless tale about youth and love with bad odds. I must say I'm really fascinated by authors that have had a rough life or a life that hasn't been good to them and then writing about it. It's quite an achievement. So this is one of the books I hope to be reading quite soon. The next book is from an author I recently read, and that was Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, a book that I thought was pretty okay. And what happens when you read about Kazuo Ishiguro in general? Well, people tell you, oh, you should read Never Let Me Go, that's a terrific novel. But of course it can't compete with The Remains of the Day, and that's why I have to have this on my list, even though Never Let Me Go was just okay for me at least. The book was published in 1989, and we meet an English butler in England in the 50s, where he has served one home for over 30 years. The lord of the house is dead, and now he talks about the past through flashbacks. And one theme of the book is the lord's connection to Nazism, and the second is that he loves his wife, the lord's wife, that is, I think. I've seen the cover of Remains of the Day, the movie, and that at least gives me some expectations that this is a love story. After I've reviewed Never Let Me Go, I saw that Kazuo Ishiguro received the Nobel Prize for Literature. Of course, I'm becoming a bookworm, so that I didn't know, and I was quite surprised because he is still young, and I thought that the Nobel Prize for Literature only went to quite old people. And also he seems to be writing in what I would call quite a modern style. I'm not quite sure where I was going with this, other than that I think of the Nobel Prize for Literature as a prize that goes to people that write in a boring way. I will read it, and hopefully I will enjoy it more than I enjoyed Never Let Me Go, and hopefully all the people in the world are right that this is an excellent piece of literature. The next book on the list is The Secret History by Donna Tartt, released in 1992. I don't know too much about it. I only know that it's been around for ages, and I've seen it around even before I wanted to read a lot of books, and that's why I think it will be easily read. And that's because it seems to have a very intriguing plot, something I say quite often on this channel. We meet a group of students at an elite college, and a murder suddenly happens. After what I could gather, we sort of see the students drag themselves into a darker and darker place where evil things can happen, and they sort of all become evil throughout the novel. And it's said to be the first dark academia novel, or at least being an inspiration for the dark academia genre. But if the book manages to create a very dark atmosphere and make me relate to how people can become evil of sorts, this will keep me happy and invested in the novel for quite some time. And of course, it's one of those books, as I said, that just keeps on appearing all over. But I haven't heard a lot about this author other than that she has written this book. I've seen her name on many covers because she writes, "This book is great," and they stick it on the front cover of a book. So I've seen her name a lot, just not on her books. Why do they all do this? I've not so long ago talked about the modern classics and why I love modern classics from Penguin, and this is a classic. They all have such small font. Let's hope this book is better than my reading experience is going to be. And it's Mikhail Bulgakov, The Master and Margarita. I bought this book because a person I follow on Goodreads said that she really loved this book and she wrote a terrific review, so I thought I'd had to read it this instant. The book is actually written between 1928 and 1940, thus it does not belong on this list, sort of, but it wasn't published until 1967, and it was published by his wife because he died before that time. And the version that was published in 67 was also a very censored version because the author lived in the Soviet Union, and the book is said to have a funny and frightening satirical view on the Soviet Union, so that's why it was censored. I don't know if that's cheating or not. I put it here on this list at least because I firstly thought it was written at that time as well, but of course it isn't. And now I think I'm going to try to explain the plot to you. Good luck to me. Originally this story was two stories and the author tried to merge them together. One of the stories is set in modern day Russia, where the other one is set in antiquity Jerusalem. And here we meet a bunch of unearthly creatures. One of them is Satan, and one of them is a writer called the Master, and his lover is called Margarita. And I'm just going to read a quote I read on the internet. The story twists and turns and all characters are morally ambiguous. Besides being a very funny novel, this novel is also supposed to be important and it has meant a lot to Soviet writers, so I think it will be good for me to read it. I thought we would continue in the footsteps of funny, and the next book is also funny, I know because I watched the film, and it's The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, published in 1979. I'm pretty sure many of you have read the story already or seen the movie. The good thing about my memory is that I can't remember anything from the movie except that I laughed a lot. And I talked to a friend of mine recently who said that, well, the movie isn't anything compared to the novel, and you might think that, well, many people say that, and they are wrong, but we will see. I have to read the book and maybe watch the movie once more, or maybe not, I am not sure. But two friends are traveling through the galaxy, and the world is going to be an intergalactic highway, and one of the people is writing a guide, a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And that's basically the very, very big plot. Also this, I know that Douglas Adams is funny, so I'm really looking forward to reading the book, together with the tens of millions of people who have already read it. We're now going from humor and over to a more important segment of this list. Important or serious at least. And that's Ngugi wa Thiong'o's Devil on the Cross. And his name is a name that often appears in Norway when the Nobel Prize is going to be given. The Nobel Prize for Literature, that is. That's just one of those names who appears over and over again, and he has quite the good odds of getting the Nobel Prize for Literature at some point. He's a Kenyan author and has written a lot of books, but this book is supposed to be one of the cornerstones of his works. What intrigued me to buy this specific book is that this book was written in secrecy in prison on toilet paper. That is quite hard to fathom that that is possible. It's sort of like I'm already impressed with the book and I can't wait to read it. The story is about a young woman who lives in rural Kenya and then moves to the capital of Nairobi, where she is exploited by a businessman, and she sort of tells her story through her eyes, but with a view on the big capitalism going on in Kenya at the time. and showing the negative sides. And so that's the big theme of this book. And the book is said to be a very important book for Kenyan authors. It's also said to talk down Kenyan dictatorship and speak for authors in Kenya to write in their own dialect. I'm really looking forward to reading this book because I've heard the name so many times, and a part of me thinks that not that many Norwegians have read this author, so I can feel special. Some years ago I traveled to Chile and I decided to be a real tourist and buy a Chilean author from a bookstore, and the guy recommended me this, Portrait in Sepia by Isabel Allende. Of course she is a famous novelist, and I did not know that at the time. I enjoyed the writing style very much, but I did not enjoy the content that much, so it was an okay experience at least. But then I got home and I thought I would Google the author, and it appears that House of the Spirits is her most known piece of literature, and it's also the sequel to the book I've read. So the book I've read is number 2, and then this is number 3. I don't think it's a real trilogy, I just know that several people appear in the books and sort of put in the category of trilogies. Nevertheless, this book came in 1982 and it's considered Allende's breakthrough novel. It started out when the author wrote a letter to her dying grandfather, which ended up with a book, and the grandfather died before the book was published. This book is also in the magical realism realm, and I've tried to soften up a bit to that genre, so it will be interesting to see. I thought I'd read some quotes from the book. The House of the Spirits is an enthralling saga that spans decades and lives, twinning the personal and political into an epic novel of love, magic and fate. I don't really think I will enjoy the plot of this book either, but since I like the language and since this is the most famous book and has a very high rating on forums and Goodreads and all that, I will give it a go, and I want to read it, but if I like it, I don't know yet. But we will just have to wait and see. I thought it had to be on this list at least. Next up is a book that appeared quite early in my bookworm career, and that's because I googled funny classic fiction novels. And it's A Confederacy of Dances by John Kennedy Toole, published in 1980. The author actually died in 1969, and he was actually awarded the Pulitzer Prize for this book after his death, so that's quite extraordinary. In the book we follow our hero, and he is not a man that succeeds in all the things he tries to do. The story is put in small chunks, so you get a story here and a story there from his everyday life, and he's quite the tragic but funny figure. I also thought I'd read a quote here to paint you a picture. A green hunting cap squeezed the top of the fleshy balloon of a head, the green ear flaps full of large ears and uncut hair, and the fine bristles that grew in the ears themselves, stuck out on either side like turn signals indicating 2 directions at once. Full pursed lips protruded beneath the bushy black moustache, and at their corners sank into little folds filled with disapproval and potato chip crumbs. I think I will really love reading about that man and all the misfortunes he is going to experience, and I think this is really a novel for me, and that's why it's been on the list for so long. One of my reading goals for this year is to read authors from countries I haven't read before, and that's why I chose this next book, because apparently I haven't read any Spanish books. The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón is from 2001, I think, I hope. It just seems like the most readable book on this list. Maybe because it's so popular, and maybe because the plot seems like a fairy tale plot, and that always or often indicates that the book is easily read. I'm just going to read something that describes the book. Barcelona, 1945. A city slowly heals from its war wounds, and Daniel, an antiquarian book dealer's son who mourns the loss of his mother, finds solace in a mysterious book entitled The Shadow of the Wind by Julio Carax. But when he sets out to find the author's other works, he makes a shocking discovery. Someone has been systematically destroying every copy of every book Carax has written. In fact, Daniel may have the last of Carrick's books in existence. So Daniel's seemingly innocent quest opens the door into one of Barcelona's darkest secrets, an epic story of murder, madness, and doomed love. Seems a bit pretentious. I think I will really enjoy that book. It seems like a simple book to read and simple book to enjoy, and there is nothing wrong with that. Making these kinds of lists always makes me find new books that I want to read, and this time is no exception. The next book on the list is A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor, published in 1953. I thought I'd just read the thing that made me think that this is the right book for me. It's an unforgettable tale, both riveting and comic, of the confrontation of a family with violence and sudden death. More than anything else O'Connor ever wrote, this story mixes the comedy, violence, and religious concerns that characterizes her fiction. In general, it just seems like this author really writes things I could enjoy. Then again, all people that is said to be funny novelists I often enjoy. As long as it's humor involved, I just fall for it for some reason. And mixing violence and fun, well, either it works or it doesn't. The only thing I know about this story is that it's about a serial killer who is apparently the only person who understands why a good man is hard to find. I didn't really know who Flannery O'Connor was before I made this list, so there's just something positive about making lists about books you want to read, and it's something I just really enjoy doing. I spent too much time looking for books to read. I should have been reading more, but that's another video, I think. If you have tips for which of these books I should be reading first, please tell me, because I surely need some guidance on my bookworm journey. And thank you for liking and subscribing and all that. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye!